Is encouraging someone to be entirely themselves the loudest way to love them? Is it loving to accept people for who they are? Is telling the truth, even if it hurts, loving or unloving? All of this and more on today's episode of Unhindered. Something we hear a lot is be yourself or follow your heart. But what does it even mean to be yourself? And what does it mean to follow your heart? I recently saw this on social media. For those of you listening online, I'll read it. It says, encouraging someone to be entirely themselves is the loudest way to love them. The meaning that I take from this post is accept people as they are and don't try to change them, or else you're being unloving. And when someone posts this, I think that they probably have the best of intentions. They want to be loving and accepting and tolerant and encouraging. But are they being honest and truthful? And if not, is that really loving? They probably want others to accept them as they are, right? Nobody wants to have people trying to change them. No one wants to feel invalidated. But plenty of us do want truth and growth in our lives. Is truth unloving? Is confrontation unloving? Is accountability unloving? Are we loving people into destruction? I think most of us want to become who God intends us to be, right? I am just trying to be the person that God has created me to be. That includes my gifts, my personality, my calling. But what does it really mean to be yourself? What does it mean to be yourself? I think that that implies that there's some specific identity that each of us has that we should be trying to live out to its fullest. And identity is a hot topic these days. The definition of identity is who or what a person or thing is. So who you are. That's the definition of identity. What is your identity? Your identity is who you are. It just is. Like, I just am my identity. You are your identity. So what is that? I guess you could say that it's the things that make you you. Your identity is what makes you you. How do we know who we are? I mean, what if somebody thinks that being themselves is being a pedophile? What if somebody thinks that being themselves is being homosexual? What if somebody thinks that being themselves means not being financially responsible, um, being a hoarder, being unclean? Maybe being themselves means mutilating their body to try to become a different sex. Should we just be whatever we want and not worry about what people think? And if we should worry, then where do we draw the line? I mean, there has to be a line somewhere, right? We don't just walk around outside and like pee in the middle of the road. We don't just walk around naked. We are not fully ourselves in any way, shape, or form. So what does it mean to be yourself? What does it mean to be who you are? Who are you? Anyone who is honest with themselves knows that how they feel about themselves and who they feel that they are is constantly being shaped and molded by a variety of external forces, including your own psyche, any trauma that you've experienced, things that not trauma, just things that you've experienced in your past. They are molding and shaping all the time who you are. So you simply cannot base your ultimate identity just on how you feel at any specific moment in time. And you especially should be very cautious about making any permanent changes based on how you're feeling in a certain moment. Let's take tattoos for an example. A lot of people get tattoos and they feel really confident when they get them and very sure in that moment that it represents their identity and it is what they want. But many, many, many people regret them later. Why? Because they changed, because they've grown, because the things that they value have changed, because their identity is constantly moving and molding into something different. We are by design adaptable, ever changing people. So we have to be careful about like basing our entire lives on feelings rather than on facts. You might wake up tomorrow and feel a different way. You might want something totally different than you do today. Some aspects of our identity are stable over time, like your core personality is probably not going to change, your ethnicity is not going to change, your gender slash sex is not going to change. Yes, I believe those are the same thing, but many aspects will change over time. So again, I ask, what does it mean to encourage someone to be entirely their self? Can we harm others by encouraging them to be themselves? We're told that if a child comes to you and says that they are attracted to the same sex, that we're supposed to accept them and encourage them to be fully themselves. Or if they come and say, a little girl comes and says she thinks she's a boy, that we're supposed to encourage her to be fully herself, even though that's not being herself, that's trying to change herself. But I digress. What if your teenager comes to you and says that they're sexually attracted to toddlers? Should we encourage them to be totally themselves? Most people would exclaim, no, of course not. That's different. And I say, but is it? How is it different? We should accept who people are attracted to in some circumstances, but not in others. Where do we draw the line? How do we come to that conclusion? Where do we look for that answer? Now, I'm of course not suggesting that if somebody comes to you and says something like these things, that you should disown them or that you should treat them badly. You can refuse to accept something about someone without disowning them and without treating them badly. Believe it or not, that's actually possible. In fact, attempting to correct the thing that they're struggling with is actually the most loving thing that you can do. When my children said that they didn't like vegetables, I didn't say, wow, I'm going to loudly encourage you to be who you are, a person who dislikes vegetables. No, I kept feeding them vegetables and kept trying to change them until they started to like vegetables. Why? Because that was the loving thing to do, because eating vegetables is good for them. And encouraging them to be fully who they were at that period of time would not have been what's best for them. I am deeply, deeply attracted to chocolate. I think that I could live on that alone, at least for a little while. Would it be loving for people to encourage me to do that, to just be fully who I am? If you're really attracted to chocolate, then girl, just go for it. If that's what you want to eat all the time, be yourself. Don't let anybody stop you. Would that be loving for people to do? No, because chocolate is bad for you. People say dark chocolate is good for you, but the sugar in it is bad for you. And dark chocolate without sugar is no good. So it's bad for you. It's bad for me. Why would my friends encourage that? Okay, well, how do we know if something is bad for someone? That's the tricky part, right? Everybody's like walking around on eggshells, like, well, I don't want to tell them not to be themselves. Like, I don't want to put my judgment on them and say, like, oh, that's bad because maybe I think it's bad, but they don't think it's bad. And that's who they are. And I'm who I am. And this is my truth. And that's their truth. It's exhausting. How do we know if something is bad for us? Two ways that I can think of off the top of my head. One is science. Science tells us that sugar is bad for us. And the Bible. The Bible will tell us what is good for us and what is bad for us. Those are two very reliable sources we can go to determine if something is bad for someone and whether we should be encouraging them to do that or discouraging them from doing that. So basically, this meme that I showed earlier, it says that the only way to love someone is to affirm them. No matter if it's immoral, if it's illogical, if it's unhealthy, no matter what, you should just shout it out and encourage them to be fully themselves. If you disagree with someone, or if you believe that they should do something differently, then you are considered unloving and even cruel in today's world. Today, we're told that the way people feel or what they are attracted to is their actual identity. So we've seen that being yourself includes being things that are unchangeable, like your sex, your age, your ethnicity, your personality. But it also includes things that do change over time, such as feelings and attractions, desires, ambitions, etc. So I ask you again, is it true that encouraging someone to be entirely themselves is the loudest way to love them? I think that encouraging someone to embrace the things that are unchangeable, to embrace their age, their ethnicity, their personality, their sex, I think that is very loving, right? They should be that to the fullest. If you're a girl, be a girl. If you're a tomboy girl, be a tomboy girl, right? That's your personality. That's the things that you like right now. That's okay. It's not bad. Science and the Bible don't tell us that there's anything wrong with those things. And really embracing the unchangeable things gets rid of transgenderism. Because if you are a girl, you are a girl. And I want you to embrace that and live that fully. If you're a boy, be a boy and embrace it and live it fully. Trying to change that is the opposite of loudly being who you are. But encouraging someone to fully be the things that are changeable could be dangerous, possibly. What if who they think they are right now is just a really hateful, hate-filled person? That's just who I am. I'm just hateful. That's who I am. That's what I identify as, and that's what I want to be. Would you encourage someone to be fully themselves if they said that to you? What if they said who they are is a pedophile? That's who they are. That's what they're attracted to. That's their identity. Would you encourage them to be fully themselves? Does that make any sense? And again, if they said who I am is a different sex and I want to mutilate my body to try to be that, would you encourage that? A lot of people are these days. I think that it is entirely possible that trying to change someone is actually the loving thing to do. Depends on what it is, though. So that's why I think that the statement in that meme is absolutely ridiculous. Are you trying to change them for selfish reasons? Maybe you want them to be ambitious because that somehow serves you. Maybe you want them to value money because you value money. Is it about you? Or is your lack of acceptance of them actually coming from a loving place? Like maybe what they're being is bad for them. It's unhealthy. Maybe you don't accept their beliefs, their behavior because you know that it's not good for them. Then I think that's loving to not accept them in that situation. Maybe you want somebody to be more social. You're trying to change it to be more social because that would serve you. But maybe you want them to be more social because you know that their lack of social ability is making them lonely and depressed and decreasing their self-esteem. And you're wanting to do it because you know it's good for them. You're trying to change them because it's good for them. You know that being more confident will be a positive thing in their life. That's loving. So do we give people what they want or do we give them what's good for them? Children want to sit around and eat candy all day. Do we give them what they want? Do we encourage them to be fully their candy-loving selves? To never brush their teeth and to stay up late, all the things that children want to do? Should we just let them be themselves? No, your role as a parent is to shape and mold them to be good people who have good hygiene and good habits and treat people well. That means you're going to be trying to change them, not encourage them to be themselves. You don't want an eternal 3-year-old. Miss Rachel. Let's talk about Miss Rachel. She's a popular content creator for children, if you don't know her. Very, very, very popular with the little children. And she received some backlash for basically promoting the type of sentiment that I've been addressing here today, that we should just accept everyone no matter what. That is the loving thing to do. And of course, a lot of people who live unhindered lives like us kind of spoke out against that and were like, hey, you should not be speaking out, supporting some of these bad things that people are doing, things that are bad for them, things that are bad for our society, because that is not the loving thing to do. And here was her response.
I've shared prayers on here before and said, God bless. And that's because my faith is really important to me. And it's also one reason why I love every neighbor. In Matthew 22, a religious teacher asked Jesus, what's the most important commandment? And Jesus says to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. There's no greater commandments than these. I believe it's mentioned 8 times, love your neighbor. So yes, everyone belongs, everyone's welcome, everyone is treated with empathy and respect. It doesn't say love every neighbor except. There are so many reasons I stand strong in love. I stand with everyone.
Miss Rachel seems like a nice person. She's probably well-intentioned. But this is the definition of what Allie Beth Stuckey calls toxic empathy. Affirming someone no matter what, even if you're affirming their sin and calling that loving, that's not loving. They say, oh, but love is love, love is love, love is love. What does love is love mean? Microphone is microphone. Oh, that really told me what a microphone is. No definition, just subjective. Love is love. Whatever we feel at any given moment. But you know what? God created love, and the Bible tells us that God is love. And so guess what? Guess who gets to define what love is? The one who is love and the one who created love. And scripture tells us that love is patient, love is kind, love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in truth. Speak the truth in love. Truth is the loving thing to do. Giving truth is the loving thing to do. Miss Rachel's message sounds good. It sounds so sweet and kind on the surface. The meme that I shared earlier, it sounds good on the surface. We have to look below the surface of things. Stop being lazy. Stop looking at things that only at face value. Think. Think. Affirming sin and affirming things that are harmful for people is not loving. The message that says that affirming everyone is loving, it appeals to our human nature. You know why? Because that's easy. Oh, telling people what they want to hear and affirming them, that's easy. But I understand that God's ways are better. God's ways bring freedom and joy. It might not be the easy way. Speaking truth to someone might not be the easy way, but it's the right way. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it?" We can't trust our own hearts. Our feelings deceive us. They deceive us. And we struggle to understand ourselves. How many times do we find ourselves in certain mindsets and in certain situations that only others can pull us out of, that we can't do on our own? When we immerse ourselves in our thoughts and our feelings, we could go to some really dark places if we start trusting them over facts and over reality. So Jeremiah 17 verse 9 that I just read, it ends in almost in like a desperation. Oh Lord, who can possibly understand the heart? What hope do we have? And then verse 10 answers the question by reminding us that it is God who knows the heart and the mind. And he's the one that acts in response to it. Verse 10 says, I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind to reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve. That should lead us to want to trust God, trust what God says, way more than we trust how we feel or what we think. If God is the only one who can understand our hearts and our minds, then why would we not listen to his guidance? Isaiah 55:8-9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So what then is the loudest way to love people? Because we all want that, right? We all want to love people loudly. I know that I do. My answer, speak the truth in love. Truth is loving. Truth is the loving thing to do. It's the whole reason that I have this podcast. My belief is that the most loving thing that we can do for someone is to be truthful with them. There are some who interpret the scripture about speaking the truth in love as meaning like when you speak truth, you should sugarcoat it in some way. You should kind of dilute it, make it easier for them to absorb because that would be loving. But that's like you're reading a lot into it to come up with that interpretation. Maybe that's interpretation, but it doesn't line up with the rest of scripture for me. For me, that scripture says, speak truth because it's loving. Because speaking truth is the loving thing to do for someone. Speak the truth in love. Speak it out of love. Speak it because of love. That's what I hear when I read that, because I don't remember Jesus ever sugarcoating truth. He just spoke it because it was the loving thing to do, was to give us truth. I think it means to speak truth because it's loving, from a place of love, because you care. Can we actually change someone? Probably not. But does that mean that you should encourage them to be more of something that is not biblical or is not good for them or is not good for others, not good for society, not good for the world? To affirm them in that? No. We are called to self control. God does not call us to be ourselves, He calls us to have self control. That's very different than what we've been talking about today. So when I said, where's the line? Do we just go pee in the street? Do we just walk around naked? No, we have self control. That's what we're called to. Encouraging someone to be fully themselves could mean encouraging them to not have self control. And according to scripture, the answer to our question, what is the loudest way to love someone? Scripture tells us that the loudest way to love someone, the greatest way that you can show someone love, is to lay down one's life for the other person. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. John 15:13. While this verse is in direct reference to Jesus actually literally dying and laying down his life for his friends, we can draw an extremely important principle from this, aside from actually dying. And that is that great love requires sacrifice. Obviously, there's no greater sacrifice than actually laying down your life for someone. That's why that's the ultimate form of love. But outside of that, great love is still sacrificial. If you only love someone when it doesn't cost you anything, is that real love? Is that really love? Real love is looking out for the good of another person, even when it costs you, even if they're going to be mad at you because you spoke truth. Truly looking out for the good of another means that you won't always agree. By nature, people are self destructive and they are resistant to change. Trust me, I'm a counselor. This means that at times, true friends, people that really love each other, are going to have to hold one another accountable. They're going to have to speak the tough things into each other's life. They're going to have to use gracious correction and intervention when needed. I mean, for example, if a friend of mine just started doing drugs and was wrecking their life, I wouldn't just be like, that's who you are. I'm going to encourage you to be yourself. No, that'd be the easy thing to do, but it wouldn't be the loving thing to do. The loving thing to do would be to intervene, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it might cost me that friendship, but it's still the loving thing to do. So the same applies to our conversation today. Accepting destructive behaviors, encouraging people to be who they are, if who they are being is not good for them, not good for society, that's not loving. The loving thing to do is going to be to hold people accountable, to speak truth, to sacrifice your own ease and comfort for what is best for them and what is best for others. And so acceptance and affirmation are not necessarily always love. Keep that in mind as you go forth in your relationships this week. Go out and seek truth, be loving, and walk unhindered.